Hello! So in today's video, I'm going to be going over 10 budgeting tips for students. This video is brought to you by the Financial Wellness Office. Before jumping into 10 tips, I want to draw your attention to the fact that 40% of Americans cannot cover an unexpected charge of $400, and 26% of Americans say they have no retirement savings or pension whatsoever. Through watching these videos, we hope that Denison students will be able to gain knowledge that will help them avoid tough situations with money or even get themselves out of these tricky situations when or if they arrive. Moving on to tip number one. So tip number one is to track your net income through writing it down. So your net income is your total revenues minus your expenses. By writing down your income, you'll know exactly how much money you have coming in. So if you have an on-campus job or allowance money, you could count that as your income. Tip number two is to track your spending. When tracking your spending, you should start by writing down your fixed expenses. Fixed expenses are things you absolutely need to spend money on and can't really compromise on. So that could be something like your monthly credit card bill. Once you've identified your fixed expenses, you should move on to identifying your variable expenses. And variable expenses are things that fluctuate and they don't really stay the same. So that could be maybe your car, gas bill, or even grocery bills. Tip number three is to set goals. So your goals could be anything from wanting a piece of sports equipment, some sort of clothing item, an Xbox, a car, maybe wanting to invest in the stock market, buy bonds or something, or even just wanting to simply accumulate a certain amount of money by, say, the end of the month. All of which are great and valid goals. Once you've created a goal, you should reevaluate it to make sure that it's realistic and attainable. Tip number four is for your goals to be SMART goals. And SMART goals is an acronym. SMART is an acronym. So the S stands for specific, the M for measurable, A for achievable, R for realistic, and T for timely. So just to give an example, so you can kind of picture how this may work with your own goals. Say you're learning a new sport like volleyball or learning how to play a new instrument like the flute. Instead of creating a vague goal like I want to make the varsity volleyball team or I want to improve my flute skills, you should create a SMART goal. So for specific, you could say, I would like to improve my setting and serving skills in volleyball. Measurable, currently my serves do not go to the opponent's side of the net. I would like for them to do so when I'm done. Attainable and realistic, I'd say yes. For time bound, you could say, I would like for this to happen in 2 weeks. If you wanted to give even more detail in terms of it being attainable, realistic, or even time bound, you could say that you want to achieve this in 2 weeks if you practice every other day or if you practice 2 to 4 times a week.
I'd also like to provide another example of how to use SMART goals. Say you're studying abroad and have a fixed amount of traveling money. It might be useful to create SMART goals as a way to help you budget your money while traveling. Say you're studying in England. A quick Google search tells me that your weekly grocery bill might equal 40 to 50 pounds, which is around 50 to 65 US dollars. The Google search also told me that a restaurant meal might cost between 11 to 35 pounds, which is 14 to 45 US dollars. When staying in a new location, it might be tempting to eat out frequently. However, that often adds up. Instead of simply planning to eat out in restaurants less, you could say something like, as frequently eating out is costly, I plan to cook the majority of my meals. I plan to only eat out once every 2 to 3 weeks during my 8-month-long study abroad program in hopes of spending less than X amount of money. If I do this, I should save X amount of money and could use that money to spend on the cost of returning home local and daily transportation cost, souvenir shopping, and engaging in tourist attractions, or whatever else you would like to use that money for. So I hope that's an example of how to use SMART goals, specifically with something related to your finances.
Tip number 4 is to create a budget. You should be realistic about your budget. Think to yourself, am I actually going to save this much money, or do I really need to spend this much money? Also, be sure to differentiate between your needs and your wants because they are different. For me, I would say spending money on allergy medicine is definitely a need, while maybe having something like Spotify Premium is more of a want. I have it, but I could definitely give it up tomorrow if I need to buy more allergy medicine. Once you've created a budget, you should create budget categories, and this should help you better understand your spending and saving habits. So, a category could be living expenses, which could contain utilities or your phone bill. I just want to keep in mind that everyone will budget differently because we all have different goals and different backgrounds. So, just make sure you have a budget and a method of keeping track of your expenses that work for you. Some people like to write down their budget and their expenses on paper. Others use Excel or Google Sheets or some sort of app on their phone. I recommend playing around with various methods to figure out what works best for you. Tip number 6, stick to your budget. If you can, stick to your budget. If you can't, consider revising it. In terms of revising it, I recommend picking a day and time to go over your budget, maybe once a month, and you should just kind of go through what you're spending and what you're saving and maybe evaluate what isn't working, so that you can change your budget or just remind yourself of what you're working towards so that you can kind of build your resolve for saving and budgeting. Tip number 7, try a digital method. So there are various budgeting apps that will help you with saving and budgeting or tracking wealth and whatnot. And they all have different perks and different pros and cons. So I recommend, trying them out and maybe doing your own research to figure out what works best for you. Some apps that I'll mention today are You Need a Budget is one. The acronym for that is YNAB. Another app is Mint. Another is Good Budget. Another, Pocket Guard. There's also Clarity Money and Personal Capital. Tip number 8, don't be afraid of change. So, as humans, we're constantly learning and growing and changing and just evolving into different versions of ourselves. So, just don't be afraid to, of course, change your budget, but also to change your goals. As we're all learning and growing, our goals are going to change, and so should our money habits to better reflect that. So don't be afraid to kind of reevaluate your goals or reevaluate how you budget in relation to your goals. Tip number 9 is to treat yourself. You only live once, and if you can afford to treat yourself, even if it's in really minor ways, you'll find greater satisfaction in saving money. And I want to highlight that. I think for a lot of us, sometimes when you hear the phrase treat yourself, you kind of instantly go to how can I spend money, like whether that's through shopping or doing some sort of activity. And you can definitely treat yourself through spending money, but you honestly don't need to. You don't necessarily need to spend money to treat yourself. You really just need to spend time, essentially. So you could spend time with friends, spend time hiking, meditating, praying, drawing. You could do any of the free activities on campus to treat yourself, just to spend time doing something for yourself that you enjoy, or with friends or family that you would also enjoy. The next tip number 10, is to utilize Denison resources. We go to an amazing institution with a lot of different resources and a lot of different people here who want to do their best to help us and see us succeed. So that includes the Financial Wellness Office. Um, the Financial Wellness Office is available to help students build financial literacy and gain lifelong benefits of developing their money skills or their skills of handling money and understanding financial wellness. And one way that you can better understand money and better understand just finances in general is through setting up a one-on-one meeting with the Financial Wellness's office, their budgeting coach. So you could have budgeting coach meetings to go over your goals with savings and your other finance goals. And that concludes today's video.
I'd also like you to draw your attention to some upcoming events. On October 23rd, there's a webinar on budgeting from 6 to 7 p.m. On October 30th, there's a webinar on investing from 6 to 7 p.m. And on November 6th, there's a webinar from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. and it's entitled Advice and Insight from an Investment Professional. The next slide shows 2 QR codes. The first QR code will take you to the Denison Financial Wellness Instagram page, and the second QR code will take you to the official Financial Wellness website. So be sure to check that out and stay tuned to upcoming videos.